Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Happy Tuesday morning to you. Welcome to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Hope you're having a good week so far. It's always a joy and a pleasure to be with you. All right, we are continuing our study of the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24 and 25. At the current time, and as we have been over the last few weeks, we've been focusing on the doctrine of the Great Tribulation. I want to reiterate something here that it's so important, and that is the absolute direct connection, the inseparable connection between the Great Tribulation and the resurrection. I pointed out to you how some commentators, they go to Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. At that time, the angel Michael shall stand up. That's supposed to be this time of the Great Tribulation, when the books would be opened, by the way. That's supposed to be the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. But verse 2, we are told, that refers to the so-called end of human history, the end of time. Now, the great question, of course, is, where would anybody get that idea from the text? Where would they get that idea from the context? It's interesting to me that scholars such as N.T. Wright, when they approach Daniel chapter 12 and verse 2, they say that this passage is about the avenging of the martyrs of God. Well, I agree with that. Now, it's really fascinating to see the machinations, the verbal gymnastics, if you please, that N.T. Wright goes through in his discussion of Daniel chapter 12. And do you know what is just absolutely glaring? Is the fact that he completely and totally ignores Daniel chapter 12, verse 7. Not a word in his book on the resurrection. You got to ask yourself a question. Okay, if you're going to affirm that Daniel chapter 12, verse 2 is about the time of the vindication of the martyrs, number one, why not examine what Jesus had to say about the time of the vindication of all of the blood of all the righteous martyrs all the way from creation onward in Matthew 23? And Jesus was more than emphatic. Verily I say unto you, all of these things what? All of the blood of all the righteous from creation onward will come upon this generation. And by the way, this generation doesn't mean family of people. That's nonsense. It's just an utter perversion of the language. So Jesus was very, very emphatic in stating, number one, that his generation, his contemporaries would fill up the measure of their sin by killing his apostles and prophets that he would send to them, and that judgment would come upon them. And he said, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stones those who are sent unto thee, how often I would have gathered you together as a mother hen gathers her chicks, but you would not. Behold, your house is left to you desolate. Well, when was Israel's house desolated? Wasn't it in that generation? Yes, of course it was. I mean, it's just simply undeniable. Now then, so when commentators come to Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, and they just take Jehoiakim's penknife and they slice between Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 and verse 2, without any contextual justification, without any linguistic justification, without any grammatical justification, and they just tell us, oh, verse 1, that's Antiochus Epiphanes' time, and verse 2, that's the end of time, inserting, therefore, 2,500-year gap in the period at the end of verse 1. They completely ignore the rest of the chapter. I mean, completely. They either ignore it or they pervert it. And I know that's a strong word, but I'm sorry. I don't know of another word to describe what commentators very often do with Daniel chapter 12. And you know, it's absolutely fascinating to me. I've found this to be true over and over and over again in formal public debate. I debated a man in Salt Lake City some years ago by the name of Wallace. When confronted with Daniel chapter 12, he literally had no answer. He argued that Daniel chapter 12 verse 1, time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Daniel chapter 12 verse 2, end of time. When confronted with verse 7, he refused to answer. We'll get there. When I debated Dr. David Hester twice, when confronted with Daniel chapter 12 verse 2 and verse 7, he changed his position 3 times in one debate. 3 times. It's in the book. You can get a copy of the book on my website. The similar thing has happened in numerous confrontations with different futurists. When they are confronted with Daniel chapter 12, they literally do not know what to do about it. Now watch this. Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, Great Tribulation. Verse 2, the resurrection. Verse 3, those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. Now notice verse 2 and verse 3 are absolutely connected. But you see, verse 3, if it happens at the time of the resurrection, as I point out in my book, The Resurrection of Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, fulfilled or future, verse 3 talks about the continuing evangelism after verse 2. Those who lead many to righteousness shall shine forth in the kingdom. Makes it kind of tough to posit verse 2, therefore, as an end of time, after which there is no more sin, no more evangelism. Hello? See the problem? Verse 4, but you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. What's the time of the end? The time of the Great Tribulation. The time of the resurrection. The end of the age, verse 3. You, Daniel, shut up the words, seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. My dispensational friends say, well, the knowledge increasing, that's got to be our day, our time, because we're living in the time of the greatest exponential increase of knowledge that the world has ever seen. Our knowledge increases exponentially every 90 days, probably less than that now. No, this knowledge has to do with inspiration. It has to do with understanding Daniel's prophecies in the last days, understanding Daniel's prophecy at the time of the end, and thus Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 14, or verse 15, excuse me, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, let the one who reads understand. Daniel sealed the book. As we shall see a little bit later, seal the book because the time for fulfillment is not near. It's not at hand. It's not imminent. But at the time of the end, the wise will understand. Knowledge will increase. That's exactly what Jesus was saying in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 15. When you see this, then understand what Daniel was talking about. Unlike those who tell us, well, when you see something or other, don't know what you will see, don't know what they would see, but then let them reflect on what actually happened in Daniel's day, which is not what is happening in your day when you see these things. So how are they going to understand Daniel when what they're going to see is not what Daniel predicted? It doesn't even make good nonsense what some people are saying, trying to explain these texts. So, Daniel, seal the book until the time of the end, when knowledge shall increase. Jesus said, when you see these things, spoken of by Daniel, understand. And then John in the book of Revelation, after reiterating, after echoing, after citing, after alluding over and over and over and over again to the prophecies of Daniel. Now remember, Daniel was told, seal up the book, it's not near. Seal up the book because you're going to sleep with your fathers until the time of the end when you will arise to your inheritance. But seal it up because it's not near. But here is John writing 500 or so years later, repeating the prophecies, and Jesus told him, do not seal the words of the prophecy. What prophecy? The reiteration of Daniel's prophecy. Why? Because the time is at hand. Now watch. Daniel was told to seal the vision because it was going to happen after his lifetime. Not in his day, not at hand, not quickly, not shortly. John was told, do not seal the book. The time is at hand. Behold, I come quickly. And we're supposed to believe that the fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy of the resurrection cited in Revelation 10 and 11 and 20 has not been fulfilled, even though John was told, don't seal the book, time is at hand. These things must shortly come to pass. Behold, I come quickly. Like I said, you know, the attempts, the verbal and theological gymnastics that some people go through to try to avoid the power of Daniel chapter 12, the emphatic, explicit comments and statements made by Daniel to Daniel, those verbal gymnastics, they're literally stunning. And they reveal the utter desperation, as I like to say, the argumentum ad desperatum of those people who are intent on maintaining and defending a futurist view of eschatology based upon, the early church writers, based upon, church history, instead of what the Bible emphatically states. Trying to be kind here, but that's what it comes down to, isn't it? Hey, look, we've got a whole lot more on Daniel chapter 12. Thank you so much for joining me for this morning's morning musings. But don't forget, go to my website, order my book, The Resurrection of Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, Fulfilled or Future. Be sure when you order it to send me a note saying you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. So, don't forget, we got more on Daniel chapter 12. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you on the flip side.